Hey everyone, this is Cam Garrity. Welcome back to This Should Have Been a Phone Call. Today on the show we have a whole bunch of guests because it's our first Redial special. Okay, here's the deal. With many guests who come on the show, there is so much great conversation that happens that I can't always get it all into an hour-long episode. Sometimes I ask too many questions, sometimes the guest had too many answers, and sometimes we just go off on wild tangents. So lest I throw away all of those moments or leave them on the cutting room floor, I have been saving them so I could piece them all together for you in this tapestry of bonus content. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, Cam, there is no way you have enough new clips to make up a whole episode. And you would be right. So we're also going to listen back to a few of my favorite bits from conversations that you may have missed. I hope you stay on the line because this is a Redial special on This Should Have Been a Phone Call. First up, some unaired random questions from Taylor Bibat and Wally Feresten. What's a song you remember having on replay almost compulsively? And not necessarily from childhood, but even the last 5-10 years.
All right. There are lots of different eras of this, right? It's like when I was a kid in the 4 to 5 range, I listened to Les Miserables, I think the cassette tape, over and over and over again, to the point that I had the lyrics memorized and saw the show when I was 5. So that was probably my first, no, I'm sure I had obsessive things before that, but that's the first one that I remember very vividly that actually really changed the course of my life. I'm sure. I mean, that was, I ended up doing theater. I ended up telling stories. That was a pretty heavy story to start with, but I think Wizard of Oz came before that. Right. In my story trajectory. I remember playing the Romeo and Juliet, the Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet movie, the soundtrack. I remember playing Everybody's Free from that, which is like the song that's playing in the church when they go in. There's like a boy singing. I don't know. Do you know this song?
I don't know. I'll have to listen to it.
It's like, brothers and sisters together we'll make it through. Oh yeah, someday our spirit. So it's like I loved singing along with it, and I just remember playing that over and over again. And then there was one song that I think on that album that it felt like I shouldn't be listening to it for some reason, so I would like stop it really fast before that song came on. I don't remember what song it was.
It had a swear.
It had probably a swear word, and it was like heavy bass. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I liked the church, like the soulful church songs just playing in the background, and in the movie you actually see the choir singing and stuff. And haven't thought of that song for a long time, so thank you, Cameron Garrity.
Anytime. I want to go back to the Les Mis thing just for a second, because I know you mentioned Wizard of Oz probably came first, but was that really like your first play or musical that you really fell in love with?
Yeah, I think Wizard of Oz probably was. I mean, I used to act it out with my grandma, but as far as like a stage musical or play, Les Mis. I don't know where I heard it to begin with, but my mom tells the story of like my uncle driving me to preschool and like coming back and being like, she's singing like this dirge, like look down, what, it's like a chain gang or something like. And I'm like this little kid. I don't know why as a kid I had a southern accent, but
and your mom's just like, it's culture. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Or like Lovely Ladies, it's like prison, prostitutes, like this is a really good show. And my grandparents took me to see it when I was 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was my first. What was yours?
The first play that I saw that wasn't a Sesame Street live show would have been seeing Beauty and the Beast. My grandparents took me up to Toronto, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump from where we are here. it could very well have been like one of the first traveling productions of the show, just based on when it was. I was in first grade, so that would have made me like 6 or 7 years old. And I'll just never forget seeing the Beast transform and just being flabbergasted, that like something was floating in the air and, you know, you didn't see any strings or pulleys or whatever, but also I just have this picture in my mind of it being the Beast almost the whole time that it was like floating and spinning. And then as soon as he touched the ground, all of the, you know, the makeup or the costume or whatever falling away and seeing the prince. And it was just like, that's like amazing. And it was also pretty cool because it was me and a whole bus full of senior citizens who went on this trip. And
I love that image so
much. And I remember we went to some Chinese restaurant beforehand and then like all hopped on the bus on the way right after the play. But we somehow accidentally got bumped up to the front row. So we were in the front row of this musical. And it like by that point, I already was completely obsessed with the Disney movie. And so here we are, house right in the front row. It was amazing. But then I also had Joseph was the other show. That was my like fourth grade, wore out the tape, wore out the CD, just knew every bit of it. I also had a thing, and Adam and I joke about this sometimes, because if you had asked me at any point in my growing up, I would have said that like Beauty and the Beast wasn't a musical. And Joseph was, because I thought a musical meant that it had to be sung through start to finish. I thought you were gonna say. I thought you were gonna say that, like, to you, Beauty and the Beast was the language you spoke, so it wasn't a musical. That is also true. But no, like I would have even said, I'm trying to think of another example, but like, you know, Hamilton could have been a musical, Les Mis could have been a musical, but you know, The Sound of Music wasn't, because they talked during that. I didn't realize there was a like that the musical was the broad term, and maybe like an opera, or, you know, so I'm sure if we had Stephen Sondheim here, he'd be able to school us both.
We are so lucky that we got to share a planet with that man.
I know.
Like, how cool is that?
I know. I think about that. Of all the artists that we either know personally or just have been able to benefit from the work that they create, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's really fun listening to all this stuff now. I mean, listening to how he's affected people. Yes, people who are continuing that genre, and also people who are not known broadly necessarily yet. Yep. But just the amount of artists that he has affected directly, not even including all the people who just listened to his music and were inspired or heard him, you know, something he said and took that into their art, but people who he mentored specifically in person, you know, or programs, or some of the most incredible people that are making work. Yeah. And we're in that lifespan of his that he lived while we lived, which, you know, I'm not a big on fandom, but artistic respect and human respect, that is what really gets me.
What's something that you wish that you weren't scared of as a kid, looking back?
What was I scared of as a kid? I don't know.
I should also say, sometimes these don't go anywhere, which is totally fine. Right. I ask more than I need to, so that then I could cut one if need be.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of my fears as a kid. My fears were like, my mom, like I said, my mom was a nurse, so she's always like couldn't ride the bike more than half a mile from the house, and you know, we had all these fears of can't get on a motorcycle. These guys come in with motorcycle accidents, and they're half dead, and you know, so it was really me living through her fears of these things. And I wanted to be a bike messenger when I first moved to New York because I couldn't find a job, and my brother lent me his bike, and as soon as I got out of his apartment to ride the bike back to my apartment, he called my mother and said, "You need to call your other son and tell him he cannot be a bike messenger. He's going to kill himself." Which I was so happy he did, because I didn't want to really be a bike messenger. It's a hard friggin' job.
Oh, I can't imagine.
So it's all these, I think the fears of my parents and my mom especially were in me. But, when you're young, I didn't have a ton of fears. I didn't have any, like big phobias or anything. I wanted to get out there and see the world and see the United States and, get out of Massachusetts and see things.
That's so my mom was, when I was growing up, was an insurance underwriter.
Oh.
So she would see all of the claims. So I had my own set of horror stories that she would come back with, and very similarly would be like, oh no, you can't do this with a hockey puck, or else you're you'll lose your eye, kid.
Yep.
Up next, replaying some of my talk with Mariah Rose Faith about body positivity in the Mean Girls musical. Then on to new bits, discussing Schadenfreude with Mike Kaplan, and why I might like Dungeons & Dragons with Catie Osborn. I wonder too, you talked about getting older in that role, and this isn't unique to Mean Girls. At a certain point, people grow up and they, you can't always play Tiny Tim in A Christmas Carol.
No.
Soon enough, it's time to play Bob Cratchit. But the thing that I love about the Mean Girls musical is it's so body positive in its messaging. The idea of everyone being a star, no matter who you are or what you look like. But I couldn't help think of the discrepancy there of like needing to find someone who looked like Regina George to be able to share that message, if that makes sense. I wasn't sure if that was something that you guys ever talked about or struggled with or anything like that, just because, and maybe that's just acting and show business in general, but it had to be, again, a lot of pressure to look like that every night.
Yeah. I am someone who definitely struggles with body image issues and other heavy topics within that realm, and I've struggled my whole life with those sort of things. And I know for me personally, I sing the line of like, and I never weigh more than 115. When I weighed 115 in my life, I was not in a healthy place. And that was hard to sing at first. And I remember changing the narrative of going, okay, I don't weigh 115. And people in the audience, some people might be thinking that of like, no, she doesn't. And I was like, that's scary. And this and that. And I went, you know what? I'm playing a character that's very insecure, who's going to lie about her weight. And she struggles with her weight also the entire show.
Yep.
And there's a lot of reflection on there to me in my own life. And I mean, I have gained weight during this time since being in the show. 1 from starting meds and 2 from being in a pandemic. And I remember having that fear of like, I weigh 15 pounds more than I did when I was doing the show. What am I going to do? I'm not going to fit into my tight costumes. I'm not going to this and that. And I did remember taking a step back and going, well, I've only had wonderful experiences with the production team of Mean Girls and everyone involved. And I don't think that they would care, because Regina George, even though there's so much about it that's like image, why she is who she is the power that she holds and the confidence that she holds it in. And because I weigh more than I did before, even when I was struggling about my image before, it won't matter if I go onto that stage with the power that this character has. But that's a narrative you have to repeat to yourself all the time, because it's very easy to get stuck in it. I remember like, this is so dark and I don't want it to like affect, my standby English is one of my favorite people in the entire world. We were a team and it was like, thank God to have her every night. My first show, my only show of this happened where I had to call out mid-show because I got sick and I could not continue on. I remember seeing a tweet that, of course, there's always a comment where someone says of like, oh, and it's a mean thing about English too. I'm not going to read the thing that they said about that, but they said about me, they were like, oh, but this new Regina is hotter than the other one. And there's something you see in that where it's like, I do think my friend is absolutely stunning and gorgeous. I hate that people are comparing our bodies and how we look. And as much as a body positivity show that this is, it's also, you think about this stuff the entire time because we are dealing with high schoolers and we are dealing with like judgment, and hopefully people walk away from it with the message that it has, which is the celebration of everybody. But, you know, there's always going to be people that don't give a shit and are cruel. But, you know, comments like that are the ones that you walk away with and go, damn, I'm going to be thinking about this all week. And I don't want to just try and fit into these jeans. I want to look great in these jeans, you know? And I think that is a bigger topic that has to deal with just the industry and the Broadway, quote unquote, Broadway body in general, and that idea and how false and gross it is. But people are stuck in their ways, and it's a way that has to be broken, and that's going to take time and conversations. But yeah, it was really hard. In summary, sure. It was really hard.
No, and I appreciate you being so open about that, because yeah, God, I mean, it's hard enough to be doing 8 shows a week when you don't know what city you're in, let alone to then get like angry fans coming at you while you're trying to decompress. I mean, it only makes me, and I'm sure anybody who's listening, like more grateful for what you were putting out there every night.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, and not just in my experience, but like any performer's experience with a schedule like this, or just a difficult schedule in general in performing. There is so much that's happening off stage, and there's going to be nights that aren't people's best performance nights. And someone could have an argument with that and going, well, then they shouldn't be having that job. And it's like, I promise you, there's no human that's a superhuman that can avoid any of these offstage experiences and be totally fine. Yeah. That you'd have to be a robot. So it's like, no, they do deserve their jobs. It's just a really hard job. And it would be a hard job for anybody. But it's easier said when you're not doing it than when you are experiencing it.
For sure. But also, like, you shoot right back at them like, hey, you know, did you get all your reports done on time, Jorgensen? Like, come on. Throw me a freaking bone here. You weren't perfect at your job either.
Yeah. And no one is. And it's just, I think with actors, performers, artists in general, it's almost like, and I don't want to compare it to people in the service industry because they get treated like absolute garbage. It's not the same. But there are parallels in the sense of like, you're working for me. You know, like you're there to entertain me. Right. And if this performance isn't perfect, then why did I spend so much money on this? And it's like, well, again, this isn't a television show where we stop and we say cut and we do it again. Like everything's live, and it's like if you're watching like a bodybuilding competition, like we're using our whole bodies. This is fitness. This is a whole fitness experience. We're doing a marathon every night, sometimes twice in one day. So it's just, there's a reason why certain roles don't, like physically can't do 7 shows a week and they have their standby do one of the performances. It's because the body simply can't handle that.
I think a moment of Schadenfreude that half of us as a country had last year was when President Trump ended up with COVID, and what that said about not anyone truly wishing ill will onto him. At least in most cases, I kind of heard people saying like, I don't want him to die, but I want Trump to not be president anymore. And just what that said about the trauma that we had endured and what we had gone through collectively.
Oh yeah, that's a great example. It makes a lot of sense. And also, I'll share this story briefly. The thing that I'm reminded of, my friend Gus, who is a practicing Buddhist who I enjoy sort of studying with and learning from, shared with me a story about some years ago. A politician died, and the politician wasn't familiar to him. So whoever told him, hey, did you hear this politician died? Gus said, oh, that's too bad. And then the person who told him said, no, actually, this particular politician was like famous for being homophobic and sexist and racist. So the reaction of too bad is not necessarily what I would say. And then Gus says something like, well, I guess it's too bad that they weren't able to live long enough and learn enough to repent and, see the error of their ways and atone and ask forgiveness and make meaningful amends and strive to help others not make those same mistakes going forward and to generally improve the state of society. It's too bad that all that didn't happen. Yes. And that's really meaningful to me. In Buddhism, the goal of becoming enlightened is so that you can help everyone else also follow that path and follow the path of decreasing suffering and increasing joy for all sentient beings. Like, the goal is for every being possible to be suffering free and joy filled. And so I think that there's an old joke, something like, I was talking to my friend, and my friend was like, man, I wish that chocolate cake tasted like crap. And I said, why? And he said, well, because it's so fattening. And if it tasted like crap, then I wouldn't want to eat. I wouldn't eat too much of it.
Sure.
And I want to eat healthier. And so the comedian telling the story says, oh, while we're wishing then, why don't you just wish for it to be healthy? Well, instead of wishing for it to taste bad and be bad for you, why not have an equally powerful wish that it taste good and be good for you? So similarly now, the idea of like, oh, is it why wish for someone who has caused others harm to be harmed so much as why not wish for there to be less harm all over, and that of course, and I understand we are all people who very likely have been harmed and have also caused some harm in our lives, whether accidentally stepping on someone's foot. We're all doing our best, and our best is still going to continue to contribute to the cyclic suffering that exists in this realm. So to circle all the way back around to where I started, probably the greatest joy that I can experience from another's suffering is my own past suffering that is no longer present in the same way, or at least now exists in a larger context of like, if I was,
I love that.
If I was sad, if I was angry, if I was, lacking in some way, the joy, the inner peace, the way that I would wish to be and that I come closer to being at some times than other times, it seems like the best way to experience Schadenfreude is at my own expense.
Well, you're a theater person. Do you like improv?
Oh, yeah.
Do you like storytelling?
For sure.
Do you like solving problems and puzzles with your friends? Do you like creating badass, like, characters where you can, like, literally do anything and be anything?
Totally.
Do you like fun voices?
Yep.
How do you feel about math? Doesn't matter. D&D Beyond exists. Because, like, that's it. Like, for me, that's why I got into D&D. It's because I worked in an improv theater for years and years. I have a theater background. Like, I'm very into, like, character creation and writing. Like, I'm really good at writing. And so for me, like, D&D is, like, absolutely a perfect storm. It's like, for me, it's not about, like, the combat. It's not about the math. It's not about, like, the dice rolls. I have an obscene amount of dice, but I still use a computer for all of my dice rolls because I'm terrible at math. But that's why I do it, is because I love the improvised storytelling, role-playing component of it, because I get to create these amazing characters. And then, like, especially... It's also, I feel like it's important to qualify. D&D has become my job. I professionally play Dungeons and Dragons, like, on the podcast, as like a charity streamer, guest appearances, like, quote unquote celebrity D&D, which I hate that so much, but it's like a whole thing. And playing that type of D&D is very different. And that's one of the things that I always have to sort of like asterisk when I talk about D&D, because I love D&D, but I love performance-based D&D. But there are other games where they're like super into combat, or they're super into the spells and all of that stuff. And I'm just like, nah, man, I'm just here to like say some witty one-liners and tell a good story. But that's why I love it. I love it because it's just, you're literally just like with a group of people. Sometimes you've known them for a really long time. And so you have these like really like deep, fleshed out, like emotional like connections to your characters. And sometimes, like, literally yesterday, I did a charity one shot, and it was like, I've never met these people. We've never played together. We have no idea what this dynamic is going to be. And we had such a good time. Like, we had a great time. And it was like, we only played for like 4 hours. I don't know if I'm ever going to touch that character again, but like, I had a character arc. Like, my character learned and grew, and like, it's just like, you get to experience like all of these, like, it's like doing a show, but you get to like actively participate. Whereas like, if you're playing Hamlet, yeah, it's fun. You're standing there and you're saying the lines, but like the lines are preordained. You know what's going to happen. but it's like getting to play Hamlet, but like maybe Fortinbras will win. Like it's rad, you know?
Oh, absolutely. That's a wonderful kind of entry point into it. So obviously you didn't start off as a celebrity D&Der. What was the process of taking it from playing with just a group of friends where it's kind of just a performance amongst yourself, right? You're just doing it for each other, and it's maybe a more intimate type thing versus now you're doing it and you're performing it outwards, and there's a much larger audience. Do you have to recontextualize anything to be in those two different spaces?
Yeah. I mean, the transition was hard for me, especially because a lot of that transition also involved literally moving across the country, because I had played in the same home game for 7 years. And it wasn't performance based. Like it was barely D&D. Like we just used it as an excuse to get together and hang out. And honestly, most of the time we played Edge of the Empire is a Star Wars based role playing game, but it's like sort of D&D, but like make it Star Wars. And we actually played way more Edge of the Empire than we ever played D&D. But I, kind of loved it. And so, I moved across the country for a job. And so I lost my home game and I didn't really have a lot going on. And then at some point after the TikTok stuff started happening, and after all of that, we started a podcast. And for the most part, like we still on the podcast, like D&D is like, we try and drop a new D&D episode at least like once or twice a month. But we just, honestly, we just started on a lark. Like Eric had mentioned very offhandedly that he had never played D&D. And I was like, that's ridiculous. How are you dating me and you've never played D&D? That's so silly. We're going to play D&D. So we sat down and it was just me and Eric, and Chris DM'd for us because Chris is a fucking phenomenal DM. He's so good. He's such a fucking good DM. Oh my god.
Dungeon master.
That man can write.
And doesn't know.
Like that man can write an entire universe in like 20 minutes. It's ridiculous. But we live streamed it. That's what happened. Is the first night that we played, I let the chat build my character and name my character and help Eric build his character. So our audience already kind of had this like connection to the character. And we just fucked around. We literally just fucked around. We fucked around for an hour. And then we posted the episode. We streamed it live and then we posted it to the podcast. And then we started getting emails. And at first we got like 2. And I was like, okay, we always get 2 emails. We get 2 emails a day, like, okay, like, oh, I liked it, whatever. And then the next day there were like 4. And then the next day there was 10. And then the next day there was like 15. And then it was like 20 a day for like a week. And there's people being like, when are you going to play more D&D? When are you going to play more D&D? I've never heard D&D played by people who sound like me. I've never heard people with ADHD like play D&D in this way where like it's not a big deal and it doesn't matter if, and I was like, well, yeah, we have ADHD. Like we're not going to change who we are to play Dungeons and Dragons. And so, yeah. And so then basically like, the internet ordered more, and so we're like, all right, if you want more, here's more. And so we started playing, and then the next thing I knew, I was sitting at Dragon Con and people were cosplaying my character, which by the way is not something that they train you on in theater school. There's no conversation about how to react when somebody cosplays you. And then and so then we wound up on a national tour. I mean, we're still like going on tour at this point. But we were doing D&D live shows. We're doing celebrity, quote unquote, streams, like all of that stuff. But yeah, it's just the, like, I don't know what it is, but apparently people really like Helvetica and Blumkin. So
fantastic. And as a graphic designer, wonderful name.
Yeah, all of my characters are named after fonts. That's like my thing. Is I will not play a character unless I can justify naming them after a font. So I have one coming up that I'm really excited about. His name is, here, I'll tell you this and see if you get the joke. His name is Newland Inline.
Perfect. I'm just thinking, Britannica the Bold would be a pretty good one.
That's really good. That's good.
I'm trying to.
Right now I've got Helvetica L. Serif. The L stands for Leslie, who is apparently named after somebody's dad in the chat. To this day, I don't know whose dad I'm named after, but somewhere out there, somebody's dad is named Leslie, and I'm named after him, so that's fine.
Our last few clips are about where inspiration comes from. It's some more new stuff with Taylor Bibat, listening back to Adrienne Birmingham on her writing process, and Austin Costello asks me how I came up with the idea for this podcast.
I'm going to think about, I have 24 hours where I can write stuff. I want to get it down on paper. And then if I still want to move forward with it after 24, 48 hours, then I have to figure out how to structure it into my life. And then I can start actually moving on it. But it's okay to daydream and then say that goes in a drawer somewhere. That's a great idea for maybe another time, or maybe that's the idea. It's written on that paper, it's in that drawer, and that's how it lives.
Totally. And yes, when you are a storyteller and when you're someone like, I think either one of us who, one of our best strengths is to just come up with the idea, it's okay if that thing only lives in your head. It's okay if that there will never be enough hours to get it all down. So picking the right one for the right time to be able to say, okay, I'm gonna dedicate a couple hours a week to see this through.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard.
It is hard. There's a virtual event design platform called Oye that I've been playing on a lot. You have to see it in order to really understand what it is, but it's a totally customizable platform where it's kind of like Photoshop for virtual events. It just kind of works the way my brain works. I kind of zen out sitting and making virtual spaces. And there's another, needle felting also kind of works that way for my brain. Like, so there are these things that kind of, I feel like I'm not forcing when I'm making with them. I was told by someone recently that her big shift, like mental shift, came when she realized she didn't need to do the things that she wasn't good at or inclined or had inclination toward. And I really need to start shifting my brain to that because I want to be good at everything. I want to try everything. And, part of why I am a good producer is because I want to learn everything. So I kind of touch it all. I've done a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And so when I'm producing, I'm able to see from those points of view a little more easily. But I have to also remember, I don't have to do those things. It's good to understand them, but I don't have to be the one to do them. Like, if I could code, I'd be better at the Oye stuff. I should maybe understand what is possible with the coding and then hire someone else to do it. So that's kind of an important brain shift that I'm trying to do. And with the art making, it's like, I am not the best. I do want to carve. I like carving wood, but I don't necessarily need to do that to make puppets. I could do it as a hobby, and right. Like needle felting, that just feels right to me. You don't have to be good at everything to be a worthwhile human. To have value.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just sitting in that for a second because I respond to that, and I think it's so easy to forget that.
Yeah, I have a friend who she was saying something, and to me it implied that she felt she had to do a certain thing in order to be an artist. And I was like, you do not have to do anything to be an artist. You are an artist. It was something that didn't even have to do with like making the work. It was just like another personality trait that she felt like she needed to have. And I was like, you don't have to try at that. That's who you are. So not even getting into the conversation about like professional versus amateur, but as far as like a value, like being a valuable person and a valuable artist, you don't have to dye your hair purple. That wasn't what she was talking about, but you don't have to get a nose ring.
People listening to this don't know Taylor has a bright, beaming purple hairdo right now.
Yes. It's like I'm always dyeing my hair a different color. No, I've actually never dyed my hair. And I have no tattoos or piercings. So maybe I'm a super boring artist, but that's okay. I still am.
Hardly.
I find that I write when I'm going through something, almost exclusively. If I am happy, content, every day is sunshine and rainbows kind of person, the words weren't coming. But I found the phases I can recall are, even I mentioned my grandmother's passing when I was 10. I have some primitive poetry that I wrote when I was 10 years old about her passing. So even back that far, when the emotions boil up within me, they spill out that way. But the times that I can recall in my adult life would be relationships in college. My first love, who in retrospect was emotionally abusive and manipulative. That was very powerful emotion for me as an 18-year-old. So I wrote a lot at that time. I wrote a lot when I met my soon-to-be ex-husband, because my love for him was profound. There we go. And I wrote a lot after my kids were born. And that's kind of a place I'm finding myself at now. I'm going to try not to be emotional about it, because that doesn't make for good conversation.
No, but it makes for honest conversation.
True.
It sounds like you use that as a therapy, that writing process. Is it something that you write to find the words, or is it more of a thing that you've marinated on what you're going through in a way, and you use the writing process to sort of finally put those words down and reflect on what you've been going through?
I think it's the latter. I find the way it happens is I'll find myself feeling a powerful feeling. And one of my favorite things that I ever wrote was a piece of poetry for my first Mother's Day, which would have been May. My son would have been like 10 months, I think. And I found myself, waking up Mother's Day feeling like just feeling these emotions of like what it had meant to become a mother, and what I felt like this different person than I was a year prior. And I just started writing, and I and the words end up rhyming. But for me, it does feel like a way to, because the emotion I'm feeling is so powerful, it's something I want to be able to share, and just explaining it in conversation doesn't feel like it's doing it justice. Just talking about, this strong feeling I'm having versus creating some sort of, beautiful thing to read back to myself or to share with others. That feels like a better representation of an emotion.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think I wonder if you feel the same way, but like there's an intentionality behind that. If you're taking the time to craft the words, if you're taking the time to rhyme, mm-hmm. You're really doing to borrow a Jesuit phrase, an examine on what's going on, as opposed to just capturing a moment on a cell phone, or texting someone like, oh, today's been great, this happened or that happened, or anything.
Yeah, I wonder if you would let me read my favorite one.
I would love that.
Okay, let me see. I wish I was someone who could confidently, and maybe I will be someday, stand up on a stage and read my poetry, but I'm gonna ask you to allow me to use this as my stage for a moment.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is what I wrote for my first Mother's Day. There is nothing I wouldn't do for you, my son. I'll give you my arms to rest and explore in, to bravely let go of there if you need them. I'll give you my eyes, once focused and choring. I'll leave them upon you, watchful, adoring. I'll give you my mind, fill it only with you. Let it worry and wonder about the things you will do. I'll give you my heart, let it burst from my chest. When you go, take it with you, a piece of me stretched. I'll give you my time if you need a bit more. If it means I'll age faster, I'll still trade it for yours. I'll give you my dreams. May they guide and empower. For once they were mine. Now they are ours.
That's beautiful, Adrian.
Thank you. I remember the feeling that morning, the beginning when it says, I'll give you my arms. That is the feeling I found myself stewing in that morning was, I am the mother of a small child who cannot yet, let me think of when this was, could not yet walk, who was unsteady and needed me to hold him almost all the time. And I found myself feeling that I didn't have my arms. You know, they were being used by somebody else. And that was the feeling I was trying to describe, because it sounds like it's not a good thing to not have your arms. And it was hard, you know, even something as simple as, you know, any mom will tell you, any parent will tell you, brushing your teeth, washing your hair, you know, eating food that sustains your body is very difficult to do as a parent. And it's hard, but my arms were needed elsewhere. And that's the feeling I found that morning. And that's how I wrote that.
I love it. No, and there's a duality there too, because like all of motherhood, you're not only willing to give any part of yourself to them, but at the same time, you've already done that, right? Because their arms are your arms, like, and they have your eyes, and they, all these factors of, you know, they're already a part of you, but you're still willing to give more. And I think that piece really captures all of that sentiment in just a really lovely way.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me read it.
Oh, I was going to say, how did this whole thing begin? How did this podcast begin? That's what I was going to say. How did you come up with this one? This is funny.
So I'm a huge fan of these really nice interview podcasts. Mm-hmm. And the more we did Puppeteers, I knew there were people who I would want to be able to talk to in that kind of long form way, who would never qualify to be on Puppeteers. And also people like you or Taylor Bibat, who even if and when we have you on the show, you know, would not be able to have the same conversation if Adam was also there, or if you were on Puppeteers, because that's something that Adam and I share together. And so this has just been a nice way for me to 100% have the kind of talks that I would like to have. The one thought, because I've thought about doing something like this for a long time, and the thing that I kept like just mentally in my head as I'm like walking the dogs every night and thinking like, should I do this? Should I? And I'm like, well, who am I going to have on? Okay, I'm going to have Austin. I'm going to, you know, have, you know, some of the artists who I like on. And then the thing that would always stop me from doing it was me saying, oh, but that could just be a phone call. Like, I don't, no one has to hear that. That just could be between me and my friends. And then I was like, no, but other people, and this was partly Adam's doing, you know, he always says like, you know, no one ever looks back at a life and thinks like, oh, I wish I hadn't recorded that conversation with someone. Like, oh, I wish I hadn't, you know, had that thing to be able to look back on. And Deb Spinney, of course, said something very similar about her and Carol. And I was like, you know what? Let's do this. And so that's where the show's name comes from. And
great.
It's working out pretty well so far.
Pretty cool. Good one.
Yeah.
Well, that's lovely. And I think what a fun way to be able to share. I don't know. I think it's an interesting time capsule for an individual. You know,
that's it.
I think if in a weird way, if you're the only person that ever listened to this podcast, it would be This Is Your Life, Cameron Garrity edition. But anybody can watch or listen in this case.
Right. That's exactly it. And it's I keep joking, it's a very selfish piece of art. But if
I feel that,
you know,
I get that. I absolutely understand that.
But the wonderful thing is, and I've, you know, learned this from the O'Neill, is that in that specificity of two very good friends talking back and forth to each other, other people are able to glean some insights into that too, I think. Yeah. And as it catches on, and as Adam already did an episode, so that'll be coming out soon, and there's some other people with some some name and recognition. And, you know, if other people are able to kind of come to it for them and then stick around because like, oh, that was a nice little talk, you know, we'll see. We did it. You came to the end of another episode of This Should Have Been a Phone Call. So much thanks to all of the guests who've joined me so far on the show, and to all of you for listening. If this is your first time here, there are plenty of other episodes of the show. Just go to phonecallpod.com and you can listen to all of them right now. Please give us a follow at phonecallpod wherever you get your social media. And if you're feeling brave, I always appreciate a good review or comment over at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps the show grow, but it also finally gets that song out of your head. So I definitely appreciate that. We'll see you next time on This Should Have Been a Phone Call. Thing. I love you. You are enough. Keep going.